Good evening and welcome to The Roast. It's good to be back after our scheduled week off, and what a week it was. There was that narrow loss in the Ashes, then the giant loss in the Ashes, and a royal baby that still hasn't been born. But perhaps the most crucial thing was Prime Minister Kevin Rudd announcing a hardline asylum seeker policy that would make it impossible for boat people arriving in Australia to be resettled in the country. Instead, unauthorised arrivals will be sent to Papua New Guinea, a country known to most Australians as that place to the north of us, which has a lot of jungle and isn't scary like Indonesia. And to make sure everybody heard about the new policy, the Labor Party launched an advertising blitz in Australia's major metropolitan newspapers saying, if you come here by boat without a visa, you won't be settled in Australia. Although if you're reading this, then you're already here, so please tear this page out of the paper and send it to your friends overseas who are planning to come here by boat without a visa and who can read English. Who was this ad for? Because it's not as though asylum seekers in desperately poor countries are trying to escape war and oppression, then using their last $2 not to buy dinner, but to frantically seek out and buy a copy of The Australian. But for an issue this complicated, well, we've assembled our own Roast Q&A panel to analyse whether this solution will finally answer the asylum seeker question.
I don't know.
Everyone shut up! Tom, this isn't Q&A. There are no answers here. There are only questions. Change the graphic. All right, from the top, one more time. Mark Humphries, what do we do about asylum seekers?
These people are often desperately fleeing for their lives. Are they not just as entitled to a decent standard of living as we are?
I don't know, Mark. I don't know the answer.
But hang on, what about the people who died on the sea? When Kevin Rudd changed John Howard's strict asylum seeker policies, more boats came to Australia, which resulted in hundreds of deaths at sea. How can we justify a policy that encourages people to risk their lives on leaky boats?
I don't know.
I don't know. Think about our own overburdened facilities. I mean, at the weekend, Nauru's detention centre was almost burnt to the ground, causing $60 million in damage. Shouldn't we be worried about repairing that before we hand over millions to Papua New Guinea?
Dave,
no one knows the answer to that.
On Papua New Guinea, though, imagine having your country used as a scarecrow to deter people fleeing their country. Australia's basically saying that going to Papua New Guinea is a fate and destination worse than death.
Well, what about just letting them move into Australia?
Yeah, but I don't know.
Okay, everyone shut up, it's happening again! All right, one more time, one last time from the top. Mark Humphries.
Well, join us again, hopefully never, for the Roast Q&Q and Q&Q&Q. Next up tonight, the US military is in hot water after two of its fighter jets dropped 4 bombs onto the Great Barrier Reef, finally making good on America's pledge to strike back against the ocean for Hurricane Sandy. Hey, to be fair, the ocean did strike first. Now, the incident occurred following a mix-up during some joint US-Australian war games.
The 2 fighter jets were supposed to drop the bombs on a range at Townshend Island, just off Australia's east coast near the reef, but were told the range was not clear of hazards.
So instead, they just dropped them onto the Great Barrier Reef. And that is a really shitty plan B. Aim for the uninhabited chunk of rock, but if that's out, go for one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And that is a big F you to the Great Barrier Reef, because until now, we've only been slowly killing it off with incidental things like pollution and overfishing and tourism. This was 2 227-kilogram laser-guided bombs dumped right on Mother Nature's face. And while they didn't explode, in part because the other 2 were filled with concrete, it did still prompt Greens Senator Larissa Waters to ask, have we gone completely mad? Is this how we look after our world heritage now, letting a foreign power drop bombs on it? Why are the Greens angry? This is what they've been waiting for. Trying to convince us about global warming has been a nightmare of relying on contentious results and expert opinion about evil invisible gases. This was a bomb on the Great Barrier Reef. It had everything the Greens hate lined up one thing after the next like it was environmental jackpot. Now, the military has defended the action, saying the selected emergency jettison area was in a deep channel away from the reef to minimise the possibility of reef damage. But even if there was a remote possibility of this happening, why did they decide to hold their war games right next to the world's largest living coral reef. I mean, that's like playing war games right next to grandma's precious China tea cups. Really, the only thing that could justify this would be if this is where they buried bin Laden and they were just coming back to finish the job in case any tourists saw him lying there through their glass-bottom boat.
Oh my God, what's that?
Hey, no flash photography, you'll fade him.
Hey, free bombs. Now, the US has to go in and clean up their mess, and for more on that, let's cross to Rachel Corbett, who's with the retrieval team. Rach, what's the latest?
Tom, there are 4 free bombs up for grabs down here, and we've got to get them back before word leaks out, because if you leave them too long...
Unscrupulous types will steal them.
They'll get heritage listed. You know, the Greens were pissed when America bombed the Barrier Reef. You imagine how much they're going to hate it when we actually remove part of it.
Well, for something that was supposed to be a useful military exercise, it really seems to have turned into a bit of a disaster.
Environmentally, yes, but this has sent a powerful message to the coral reefs of the world. The United States will not stand idly by and be made to feel guilty by your slow death. Instead, they'll bomb you like any other target. Iraq, Afghanistan, Great Barrier Reef, all the same, all bombable in the eyes of the United States.
And finally tonight, it has been revealed that thousands of Indian students, skilled workers and 457 visa holders entered Australia on fraudulent travel and work documents. Internal audits of the Immigration Department found visa fraud rates approaching 50%, meaning that statistically, visas are now the 4th most fraudulent documents, right behind tax returns, resumes and Facebook event attendance. Sandy Logan, a spokesperson for the Immigration Department, said that around the periods of 2008, 2009 and 2010, the fraud levels were quite considerable, a matter of real concern. And it was a matter of real concern. I mean, we all remember those sleepless nights. Honey, fraud levels in Australia's visa process are quite considerable.
Oh, I know.
Now, according to this internal audit, the Immigration Department is nearly powerless to stop identity fraud because of the low level of technology in Indian passports. You see, here in Australia, we've become reliant on technology. We're all about our fancy pants passports with their microchips and unterrible paper and holographic emus. Our Immigration Department has forgotten how to deal with Indian passports, which are reportedly not nearly as advanced. So I can only assume they're cobbled together using clag paste, crayons and papier-mâché. To this point, I'd like to remind you I'm not a real journalist. Now, the information came to light following a Freedom of Information request by the ABC's fact-checking unit. Okay. It seems the Immigration Department took their sweet time replying to that request because it took nearly 2 years, much longer than statutory required periods. And almost as long as we've been waiting for the arrival of that royal baby. Which means those dogged officers have been on tenterhooks for a long time at the ABC fact-checking unit.
Oh, hey, have we heard from immigration yet?
No.
Tea's ready.
Sorry, what's the deal? Are we cutting to something every time I say fact-checking unit?
All right, Sean, you're swimming, and there's Rachel in the submarine. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
It's good to know. Now, this fraudulent activity was such a problem that in one case, a man who had previously been detained and deported from Australia was able to re-enter the country, clearly not understanding the "and stay out" part of his ejection. The man was able to subvert the numerous visa checks by simply changing his birth date, an idea he got from a teenager wanting to look at internet porn. Now, the man was eventually caught and re-deported. However, the migration agent responsible for the fraudulent application was also living in Australia under a false identity. So I can only assume they're now both plotting to enter New Zealand in their own John Hughes film. So with fraud rates approaching 50% at one point, it indicates a pretty comprehensive failure on the Immigration Department's side. If you fail at something half the time, you're either really bad at your job or you're using a coin to make your decisions for you. Mark Humphries joins me now in the studio. Mark, how could this have happened?
Well, identity fraud peaked between 2008 and 2009, but gosh, that was a while ago. I really can't be sure where everything went wrong.
Oh, well, maybe it's like losing your keys. You just need to retrace your steps. So let's go back to 2008. How would someone from India have gotten into the country?
Well, their journey would have begun in the Indian Immigration Department, where passports were made using state-of-the-art technology to ensure the security and legitimacy of all the identity documents dispatched. Once the traveller arrived on our shores, authorities at Australian Border Security rigorously scrutinised each individual to ensure there was no evidence of visa fraud.
I had a haircut?
Oh, all right, go on then.
Now, Australian immigration like to keep this whole process transparent, so when the good folk at the ABC fact-checking unit want to get in contact, an employee at the Immigration Department is always free to take their call.
That phone's not going to answer itself.
You know it's the ABC. They're doing a story about us. They don't just want those fraud figures for fun.
And that's how it worked.
Right, well, that all seems pretty competent to me. I don't know what they're worried about.
And who are they, Tom? Who are you talking about?
The ABC fact-checking unit. Oh,